All right, what is up? I'm gonna go to LinkedIn for a question here. So thanks very much for sending this one in. It says, "Hope all is well. I'm a mid slash senior software engineer based in Brazil and currently exploring opportunities abroad. While I'm confident in my day to day problem solving skills, I find algorithmic interviews, so like LeetCode style questions they point out, challenging, and I also want to strengthen my interpersonal skills. Do you have any advice on improving both?" And then they have a sort of a follow up question on H-1B visas. I'm probably not going to talk about the visa stuff, and especially because even for me, like I'm not even on an H-1B, so I'm probably going to park that part for this conversation. But if you have questions that you want answered, leave them in the comments. And of course, if you have something that you want to keep private and add more detail, you can do as this person did in message. So on LinkedIn, it's just going to be Nick Cosentino, and on any other social media platform, just look for Dev Leader. That's my main YouTube channel. Has content just like this, except it's not a stream of consciousness. It's more polished, edited videos. So that and tutorials. So with that said, let's dive into this. I've made a few videos on this kind of stuff already in terms of LeetCode and stuff like that. So when I was thinking about how I want to answer this, I think it's going to sound kind of maybe like silly or like oversimplified, I guess. But if you want to get better at LeetCode, you got to practice it. It's kind of like anything else. Like I think for most people, you just have to put time in and do it. But it's kind of unfortunate because like this person's calling out. I find can't speak. Find algorithmic interviews like those on LeetCode challenging, and this is kind of the interesting point here, which is like it's basically an interview based thing, almost exclusively. There's people that like to do, um, lead code style stuff. They find that it helps them think through and problem solve. That's great, but I think that there is such a little conversion from leet code to like building software applications and services and just overall software development. It's like a very very specific skill set, and this is why it's kind of challenging, I think, for some people, especially if you like this person's saying, "I'm confident in my day to day problem solving." They're already a mid to senior level software engineer, so it's not like they can't develop software. They're probably pretty good at it. That's why they're at where they're at. But the reality is, when it comes to things like lead code, your day to day, this is my opinion, at least in my experience, day to day work in terms of building software doesn't really translate well to lead code, and then the inverse as well. If you're just really good at lead code, it doesn't necessarily translate well to building software. Now, there will be people that absolutely disagree with this, and that's totally fine. I'm just giving you my opinion. I'm giving you my experiences. That's why this is my channel where I make vlogs on this stuff, because I'm just sharing my experiences. I have absolutely seen people that, and I've had friends, like, especially out of university, that are very good at getting set up to answer leet code style questions. They practice this kind of stuff. They're very good at thinking through like problems like this, looking for tricks and optimizations, and they study like crazy. I find like leet code style questions, it's not an exact parallel, but a similar one, similar enough that I want to mention it. Um, I've said before in other videos, like I'm not very good at taking exams. Like if you asked me to go build a project, I would feel very confident doing it. And it's almost like I don't care what you tell me to build. I know I can go build stuff. But if you were to sit me down in an exam and then try to quiz me on like information, I generally struggle with that. And it's like I think for a couple of reasons. One is I get nervous doing it. I kind of draw blanks and stuff. That becomes a bit of a vicious cycle. And then the other thing is like I don't practice doing that, and that's like a way of thinking and recalling information and stuff like that. So I think like lead code, kind of like taking exams. I've seen people where it's almost like they cram for an exam, except they're like blasting through lead code, and they get very good specifically at doing lead code and being able to recall this kind of stuff. I think it works very well for interviews, especially where you have to do lead code style questions, which is unfortunately more places than I'd like, but it's kind of the reality of it. I'm hopeful that this kind of stuff changes over time, but My general advice to this person is if you're finding like I am a engineer that can write software, or even if you're not yet in the industry, the same stuff applies. You have to go practice it. When I was applying to big tech after I left a startup prior to Microsoft, and even for like I'm an engineering manager, and even for my engineering manager role, I set aside time for the period that I was applying and just basically was grinding LeetCode questions during those time intervals. So I would set aside time for LeetCode style questions, for system design questions, and for behavioral interview questions. Now, for me, my behavioral interview questions as an engineering manager would probably carry the most weight because that's most of what my job will be. Coding questions for me would carry the least weight generally, and system design would probably be up there in terms of like gauging technical and kind of thought process on stuff because engineering managers generally aren't diving right into the code, but might be helping more with architecture and guiding teams. So, how I have to approach interviews certainly looks different, but I still had to go grind LeetCode. And at that point, I had been programming. I had done 10 years of professional software development and 8 of those years as an engineering manager, IC hybrid. So, like, that's 10 years into my career, and I still had to go grind LeetCode. Um, I'm just trying to share that with you because if you're the kind of person who's like kind of nervous about like yeah, having to go for interviews, and you're like, oh, I don't know how to do LeetCode, and that's kind of the thing holding you back. Like I'm just telling you, like, hey, yeah, it's probably going to be hard, but it's something that you can absolutely practice. There's like dog hair floating around on my face, and I can't see out of my left eye. And then my well, you guys haven't seen my dogs. One sec, because one kind of snuck in. I'm not sure if I can turn the camera around for this, but give me one sec. I'm gonna unplug stuff and try to get you guys to see Lila, who's my older dog. I think she's 10 this year. Um, but hey, this is what happens when we're not commuting. Ready? Here's Lila. Where are you going, Lila? No, okay. Camera shy, I guess. But yeah, if you have to like if you have to go for interviews, I would highly recommend that you practice LeetCode. I think that if you're anticipating that like, hey, I've been building software, it should just be easy, like it's probably going to be a bit of a rude wake up call. Or you might apply to a place where they're not asking you LeetCode questions. That's great, in my opinion, because I don't think that they translate really well into anything useful. But that's been my experience. Okay, the other part that this person was asking about was, aside from the visa stuff, which I'm going to skip, was strengthening interpersonal skills. And there's a couple ways I could try to answer this because I don't know if they mean in terms of how they're interviewing and like showcasing that or truly working on them. Interpersonal skills are, again, like any other skill, you have to practice them. And I think a lot of software developers are in software development because they think that like naturally they're probably going to be spending more time with computers versus people, and that's more comfortable. And I get it. Like I'm super introverted. You may not know that, but like I'm very introverted. The fact that I can talk to a camera here, it's just because I've been practicing doing it for a couple years now. Like I've made, I think, 450 YouTube videos. So it's easier for me to talk to a camera. I can actually speak in public now. But in terms of like peopling, spending time with people, I'm an engineering manager. And if I do a day of one on ones, I literally have to sleep after work because I am so exhausted. It's so much energy out of me. So interpersonal skills are things you have to work on. And it's kind of like it's extra unfortunate if you are more introverted because it's probably going to feel like it's more work. So, in terms of answering from the behavioral interview side of things, like if the person's asking about how do I showcase interpersonal skills, that's going to be your behavioral interview. So, what I would recommend is what you like the framing for this in terms of practicing is I would think through different sort of highlights or lowlights of your career so far, projects you've built, different accomplishments, things like that, different projects. And I'm trying to think what's the other word. Like it's not necessarily just code you've built, but like maybe you were responsible for helping putting processes together, whatever, like sort of general accomplishments and things like that. I would try to come up with a list of those things. I would try to look through example behavioral interview questions and try to come up with what is the question actually like trying to get out of you. What is the interview like? Why are they asking you that? Because I can tell you in behavioral interviews, we're not trying to like get you to, defend why Postgres was the best database. It's not like we're not talking about the technology. We're trying to see how you were navigating. Like, hey, if you wanted Postgres and someone else wanted something else, we don't care which one you picked. It's not like there was a right or wrong answer. We care about how you approached this, potential conflict. How did you get buy-in? How did you navigate the situation? It's even potentially more interesting if there's like a dynamic in terms of tenure and, seniority. So like we're interested in exploring how you navigate these things. That's the behavior part. So for this person, if it's interpersonal skills, how do these get showcased in interview? It's those types of questions. So I would write out a bunch of different scenarios that you've been through, highlights, lowlights, have them kind of listed. I would write out a bunch of example questions, and then I would go through this exercise of trying to see, like, hey, if I needed to answer this question, could I walk through this scenario and could I sort of take parts of that story to really highlight how I was exemplifying that? So yeah, cool. You worked on a project and you were able to deliver, a really important feature for a product, and on the right timeline. You got to lead that part. Great, cool. But like technology and product part aside, because that's not really what they care about when they're interviewing you. Um, was that an example where you were demonstrating like leadership, team collaboration? Were there interpersonal conflicts that came up? Then you can leverage that one as an example to kind of walk through. And I would just kind of go through example questions and scenarios like this. Ideally, I would recommend if you're like me, have a couple of examples, and that way, if you blank in the interview, you're not panicking and going, "Oh man, like I know I have one for this, but nothing's coming to mind." Because it's if the good one is escaping your mind, at least you have a backup scenario that you can walk through. So I think that's my recommendation for that. I will mention that I do have a course online on Dome Train for behavioral interviews. So if you're interested in that, I think it's like 6 hours long. It's between myself and Ryan Murphy, who's someone I partnered with to make those career based courses. So that does a really big deep dive on it. Again, that's dometrain.com. There's sort of career courses listed there. You could search my name there. Um, that has a lot more information, but what I just told you is like one of my main takeaways that in terms of practicing that stuff and trying to be more effective at answering those, because so many software engineers, I don't blame you because I think this way too. When someone's like, tell me about a project when we just want to go talk about the technical stuff. That's the cool part to us. But then we miss the fact that like someone's trying to extract some information from you about how you work with other people. So that's my tip there. Outside of interviews, this is the kind of stuff that has to be practiced. So I would make more if you're finding like I don't have time where I'm like talking with others much. Like maybe you want to periodically set up a one-on-one. It could be once a month to talk to someone more senior on your team. Try mentoring people, trying to build up empathy and understand where they're coming from, right? You'll practice patience, you'll practice empathy, you'll practice understanding, you'll practice your communication that way. So I think that's a couple of examples there where that's either someone that's more senior than you for could be one-on-ones, could be anything, and mentorship opportunities I think are one of the I don't want to say the best, but like they're a really good way, in my opinion, if you have capacity for it. You may find it's very frustrating because you haven't yet built up patience, you haven't yet built up good communication, but like that might be a good thing to try, and you'll quickly see like are there areas where I'm kind of struggling, like in my interpersonal skills. Um, but if you're already overwhelmed with work and you try to take that on as well, it's probably going to be a little bit crappy for you. I would try to make sure that if you have things, roles like product owners, people that might be less technical hands on the code, carve out time to have conversations with them, right? Try to understand like what they're trying to do. Like, what do they need out of you as an engineer? How can you be more effective working with them? I think there's lots of opportunities that are literally just talking with people. And I'm not saying, hey, go change all of your schedule to be just 100% meetings, but try to find these opportunities and create them if they don't exist. Because if someone were to reach out to me, just as an example, and they were like, "Hey Nick, like could I schedule 30 minutes with you to chat with you about like how I could be more effective in terms of getting you what you need, because I just want to understand your role and like how we work together, and I just want to make that more effective." I would say yes to that. Like, if I'm working with someone and there's an opportunity to work better, I'm not going to say no to that. So, I think there's a bunch of stuff like that you can try doing. Um, like if you're finding yourself in conflicts and things like that, one of the things that I always tell people is like, step one is just keep calm. It's way too easy if you're finding that there's friction, that we get heated, we want to defend things, but like often what happens is we're missing the point. We're just trying to say, no, I'm right, you're wrong. Doesn't matter who's right and who's wrong. It matters that you're arriving at a solution you can move forward. So try to de-escalate things like that. Like we don't need to be like fighting about it. It's not the who part. It's about, the what and why to move forward. Um, I would say too, though, this isn't just about practicing. If there's challenges, so if this is kind of a repeat thing or you notice something's lacking, try to have a conversation with your manager about, um, if they have observations about this kind of thing, depending on whatever the scenario is, if it's repeated. And if you're working at this kind of stuff in a timely way, so say you were able to navigate a conflict and your manager was sort of aware of it, um, maybe like take that opportunity to the next time you're chatting with your manager to say, hey, or message them after or something, say, hey, by the way, like, I think that I navigated that pretty well. Do you have any like feedback or observations on what I could do better? Um, because then you can start to get a bit of a feedback loop that way. Um, you could ask at Microsoft, we have something called perspectives that people can write for each other, and they're transparent to the manager. Usually people write these and they're very much just like, good job, you're the best, which I think is nice, but it's like, it's also kind of little value. But when you get constructive feedback, I think it's great. And some people are worried, like, oh, your manager is going to see that I'm giving you constructive feedback. Or if you get constructive feedback, you're like, oh no, my manager is going to think I'm terrible. But that's not the case. Like everyone has things to work on. And if one of your colleagues is highlighting, hey, by the way, like this is an area that I think you could improve in, and here's how I think that could happen, that's just an opportunity for you. I think people frame this stuff so much like oh no, I'm going to get shit on for it. But it's like, if someone's telling you something they think is going to help, and then you're able to, if you believe, like if you also agree with that and you're like, hey, I could try doing better at this, you're only going to get better. Like that's going to look even better to your manager if you're able to demonstrate, hey, I got feedback on this, I took it to heart, tried to do something about it. And if you don't agree with it, maybe that's something you can have a conversation with your manager about, get their perspective on it. So this might be something, if you don't have it formally, you could still reach out for feedback. And even having those conversations is interesting because number one, you're practicing interpersonal skills. Number two, if you do get feedback, receiving feedback is about being like interpersonal skills. How do you handle that feedback? What do you do with it? So those are a handful of different options, but the point is that these are things like that you need to practice and be doing. And this is why I always highlight things like soft skills for software engineers, because there are so many clear opportunities to practice technical skills. But when people find themselves in a situation where they're saying, hey, how do I work on my soft skills? It's almost like, I don't know what to do. But really, it's just about being a person. Just sometimes you have to be a little bit more proactive about it. I think that's it, though. I really wanted to get Lila on the camera, but she's being super shy. So I'm going to see if I can get her to turn around. She's like hiding in the corner. You going to say hi, Lila? She's pretty cute. I think that's it, though, folks. So thanks for watching. I hope that's helpful. I'll see you next time. And Lila also says bye, even though she's hiding. Take care.